In topic 2, we looked at the role of markets in helping society decide how to share out production or how to ration production. In this topic, we will focus on the question of how to produce. Economists are concerned with this question because how we produce goods and services from the limited resources that we have can have a great impact on how many needs and wants society can actually meet. If producers are efficient in producing, they are getting the maximum possible output of goods and services out of the factors of production that they employ. For example, if McDonald's is efficient in their business, they are able to produce as many burgers, chips, apple pies as they possibly can from the land, labor, capital and enterprise that they have within the firm. So, let's learn about production and productivity. Production is a process whereby inputs or factors of production are converted into outputs, for example, goods and services. For example, the production of iPhones involves taking factors of production such as glass, aluminium, workers and machinery in order to produce outputs such as iPhones. Productivity is a measure of the rate at which production occurs. Factors of production are required to produce goods and services. Therefore, we can measure the productivity of factors of production. For example, labor productivity, or the productivity of capital, or even land. In order to measure productivity or the rate of production, we need 3 bits of information. We need the output produced by a factor of production, how many factors of production are employed in order to produce that output, and a time period. Therefore, productivity can be expressed, for example, as output per unit of input in a given period of time. An example of a measure of productivity would be the productivity of workers at the Apple factory, or labor productivity. Workers may produce 10 iPhones per worker per hour, and that would measure the rate of production. So why is productivity important? Well, if the factors of production employed by a firm are able to produce a higher output, or if the factors of production increase in productivity, the firm has become more efficient. For example, if a teacher is able to increase his service of education to more students, his or her productivity has increased, and this may save the school money. This could therefore lead to higher profits for schools. Not that schools should be making profits, but that's another story. Productivity is a measure of the rate of production. Inefficiency explains how much output a factor of production or an input loses compared to its maximum output. Firms seek to avoid inefficiency or wastage as it increases their cost of production. If firms are able to increase the productivity of their workers, it means the firm can reduce its costs and therefore increase its profits, as workers or machinery can produce the same amount of output quicker, and therefore the firm would have to pay for less time in wages or less energy in powering machinery. This reduction in costs as a result of higher productivity can lead to firms making higher profits. And remember, a lot of the time for firms, it's all about the profits. As mentioned before, we can measure the productivity of different factors of production. An example of measuring capital productivity might be 10 cars produced per robot per hour in a car plant, or 10 pizzas produced per oven per hour in a pizza factory. So how do we increase capital productivity? The answer to that question is investing in technology and improving machinery so that machines can produce more goods using less energy. We can also measure labor productivity. An example of this might be an iPhone worker produces 10 iPhones per hour. How do we increase labor productivity? Now, this is a question that firms ask themselves a lot because labor costs are a large percentage of the overall costs that firms pay, and firms are interested in increasing profits, and therefore they may look to reduce their costs of labor by making workers more productive so that they have to pay them less time to produce the same amount of output. There are a number of ways that we can increase labor productivity. Examples would be division of labor, which we will look at later on in this topic. We could give workers incentives like increasing their wages or providing them with benefits such as a free gym membership. We can allow workers to work longer hours or work part-time if they want to increase the amount of work they do for a firm. We might also train and educate workers, or we could provide workers with better machinery and tools to produce with. So how do we calculate productivity? Well, here's an example. Jermaine paints portraits. In a day, comprised of 8 hours, Jermaine paints 24 paintings. Calculate and express his productivity per hour, assuming that he works at a steady rate. Well, in order to answer this question, we need to divide the number of paintings Jermaine produces by the number of hours that he works. We do 24 divided by 8, meaning Jermaine produces 3 paintings per hour. Here's another example of how to calculate productivity. 2 workers in an iPhone factory produce 100 iPhones in a working day of 20 hours. Assuming that the workers work at the same rate, calculate the productivity per worker. Well, if 2 workers produce 100 iPhones in a day, 1 worker would produce 50 iPhones in a day. We divide those 50 iPhones by 20 hours, meaning each worker produces 2.5 iPhones per hour.